So that laughing out loud guy yesterday dressed like a lemon, so I figured I'd dress like a lime. This is my Dayglow shirt. Yeah? Let's wait till we close the doors and keep the outside noise out. All right, it's a little after 9. This is going to go on till right before 2000, and only about 3/4 of the presentation is actually on SQL injection. The rest is my web application wax museum, which is a collection of interesting screenshots. Before I start, I'm Matt Fisher. I work for SPY. Everyone here knows who SPY Dynamics is, right? Right. The talk is on SQL injection. Yes, this is a real Google ad. Obviously, I was Googling SQL injection, and someone in some marketing department paid for the wrong search terms. Before I get going, how many people here work for the government, right? Gubbies. Any gubbies? Okay, Chris. How many people here are from the commercial sector? .com, commies, okay. And the rest of you are unemployed? Right. Amen, brother. I will be soon. I'm talking about SQL injection. SQL injection is a vulnerability, right? The earliest I could trace it back is RFP, right? It seems like all this stuff starts with RFP, about 6 years ago. But most recently, it's become a really big vulnerability on the web. The CVE these days is almost dominated by web app vulnerabilities. 2 weeks ago, I had the perverse pleasure of sitting on a panel full of CTOs of different companies, right? And that's how we play. All these other companies sent their CTOs, and we sent an SE. One of the guys on the panel was Robert who runs the CVE database for MITRE. And he had some really interesting stats on the CVE. The majority of the CVE these days is cross-site scripting, and the second runner-up is SQL injection. Now, there's an article written about that as a result of that panel that mistakenly said that cross-site scripting is the most exploited vulnerability out there. The journalist heard that was #1 ranking in CVE, #1 vulnerabilities in the CVE, but it didn't really understand the nuance that CVE is a collection of known vulnerabilities in COTS and open source software that necessarily reflect real-life attacks. I do a lot of web assessments. Everybody in our company does. Billy and myself do plenty. And I've been doing some incident response recently, kind of pro bono for different agencies and facilities in the DC area. And I'm seeing way more SQL injection than cross-site scripting. I'm seeing more SQL injection than anything else when it comes to web app side. I can't attest with any credibility to the network side operating system attack. When it comes to web app attacks, SQL injection is it, because it's targeted. You don't have to mess around with any social engineering or any third party, right? Script attacks attack end users, bouncing things off the server, so to speak. SQL injection, you're hacking that box, and it's fairly easy to detect. It's fairly easy to exploit. And it's a devastating attack. The big thing about web application vulnerabilities, of course, is that your typical models only go so high, right? Network security, operating security, and the sort take care of the daemon, the operating system, but they don't address the application itself very well. And SQL injection is a web application vulnerability. SQL injection exists in the web code. The first myth, it's a very kindergarten myth, but a lot of people actually believe that SQL injection reflects a problem with the database server. That's not the case. SQL injection comes from the way you build your queries in your web code and you send it off. So it's a vulnerability that exists in the application that can be exploited over 80 or 443 or any other port from any HTTP client, whether it's wget, Internet Explorer, or my cell phone. The really cool thing about SQL injection, though, is it completely bypasses the perimeter. It shoots right through. When you perform a SQL injection attack, right, you're browsing through a set of firewalls, a set of IDSs. Most likely, it's redundant pairs of firewalls, and you're using access they have to give you to use the application, again, on any port. And then you're tricking that application into running your database commands for you, running your database queries for you. That application uses the exact same access, the exact same authentication and login to the database that uses for its normal work, right? The application has to have privileges and connectivity to the database for the web app to work, and you're simply riding on top of that. So you don't see new ports being opened, you don't see new attempts, it's all writing pre-existing stuff and gets you right through what could potentially be 4 sets of firewalls, 2 sets of IDS/IPSs into that database. And from there, of course, you can get data. You can do a lot more than get data, though. And once you are on that database, it's unfortunate. You go to conferences, you read papers, and everyone says defense in depth. Everyone understands that you need to defend more than your perimeter. But in the real life, right, I bet most of you go back to your office, and the big emphasis is on perimeter security. You can't do what you can on the inside. But the vast majority of organizations I've seen are very strong on the perimeter and very, very weak inside that. And once you get into the database server, if you start hopping from there, you're pretty free and open. Now, SQL injection is about running arbitrary database commands. It's not about reading credit cards from a database. That's one of the arbitrary commands you can give. But SQL injection allows you to run arbitrary database commands. Like an overflow gives you, remote arbitrary commands on a Windows system or a Linux system. And there's a lot of different types of commands you can use. But the most important thing to take back, if you haven't figured this out yet, is that SQL injection is more than reading the database. It's arbitrary commands, any commands available to that web application. It's not a database vulnerability, it's a code vulnerability. You cannot fix SQL injection on the database server. You can mitigate it. You can restrict what someone can do once they've injected by doing basic things like having multiple logins with least privileges. The core vulnerability in SQL injection is not input validation. And I might be going out on a limb. Some people may think this is arrogant of me, but input validation has nothing to do with SQL injection. SQL injection is about handling data safely, just as cross-site scripting is, just as doing file commands are, right? If you're taking input and how you have to handle that data safely. Input validation is a mitigation against unsafe data handling, right? It's knowing that my query may not be proper, my responses back to the page may not set their encoding type properly, or I might not be sandboxing my file access properly. Input validation can certainly mitigate SQL injection. It can certainly make it more complicated, and in some cases, it can prevent SQL injection. But it's still not the fix, and it's still not the problem. SQL injection is a result of concatenated variables into dynamic queries. It's called SQL injection because of the language used. It has nothing to do with MS SQL Server. It's not an MS SQL Server specific issue. It relates to all databases that speak SQL. You can even do SQL injection against Access databases. Access speaks SQL, and you access it through ADO just like any other database. Believe it or not, MS Access is a little more difficult to do injections against, though, because it doesn't have any system tables you can enumerate from the outside. So it makes it very difficult to figure out the lay of the land and do a reconnaissance. I'll talk about more about that later. The general techniques of SQL injection are the same regardless of the database you're going at. Some of the specific things will change, however. The semantics, the syntax of the commands, obviously the procedures and functionality on the server you can use, the schema will certainly be very different. The permission setup will be very different. These techniques apply to all databases. There are two basic types of SQL injection, verbose and blind. Some people call verbose error-based. Like if you use Squeal or Absinthe, Numeric calls it error-based SQL injection. I think he's changing it to verbose. Verbose SQL injection is what pretty much everyone knows about when they first learn about SQL injection. It means that you get exceptions back. You get those ASP 500s with the ODBC error message in them, and those error messages are very useful for figuring out attack things. However, there are certainly applications in the wild, in labs, and in QA all over the place where they've done some good basic error handling, right? They're using a try catch finally and on resume next. They made the IIS and the Apache config changes so that there are no ODBC error messages, but they never went back and fixed the core query, which is the core vulnerability. So as a result, they've killed the symptom of the problem, but not the problem itself. So it's as if they, like when you break your leg causes pain so that you know there's a problem. If you take a painkiller, there's no pain. The pain goes away, the problem is still there. If you simply suppress errors without fixing your queries, you're still just as vulnerable, but the exploit technique is very different. It's what's called blind SQL injection. We have white papers on SQL injection on our website. They're really good. The white paper on blind SQL injection is killer, and they're both available on our website. On with me so far, by the way. There's some pretty technical stuff. Everyone got the ones and zeros and all that? Right. It gets better, I swear. Now, finding and exploiting SQL injection is fairly simple. The finding part is easy. The whole thing about SQL injection is finding dynamic queries. That's trivial in web applications these days. In this sample query, there's a parameter called error code, which is passed from a redirect, and that parameter tells the database what error code to retrieve and print. The actual code that does that looks like this, although in reality the X's are replaced with other values. You set up your ADODB connection object, right, which is basically the networking connection to the database, and you give it the query you want to execute, the static part of the query, and you pass in that error code to the query. Then later in the HTML section, you open that record set. In this code, we loop through that record set and all of the results back. When we're at the end of that record set, we close out our objects and destroy the objects to free up a little memory, and then we continue with our HTML. And this is how you get that bad username right in the middle there. That bad username comes from the database. The rest is static HTML. This is basic stuff. And it's a very common way of doing a database query. A lot of dynamic queries are built this way. It's pretty simple. The static portion of the query that never changes, right? You build that out as a constant, as a text string. It's static, so you hard code it. Select error message from error messages where error code equals. The only part of this query that actually changes is the error code itself. Now that comes from the browser. The application may pass it through a redirect, or it may pass it through a link or a form, but it's coming from the request object. It's coming from the browser. So you take that error code and you slap it on the end of the query, and you pass it to the database. You see this in textbooks. You see it in papers, websites all the time, presentations, and it's a generally accepted way of doing things. It's a very commonly taught way of doing dynamic queries. But it's actually the worst way you can do one.
Actually, most of the MSDN sample code tells you to do it this way.
Yeah.
Which is funny, because even experienced developers think this is the way you do SQL.
This is actually the worst possible way you can build a dynamic query for a couple different reasons. Security-wise, it's really bad, and we'll go through that. But it's actually low performance as well, because it has to be compiled on the fly, and the execution plan has to be built on the fly and everything. It's a poor way of doing things, but regardless, right, if that's what you see, that's what you do. And frankly, a lot of developers are out there self-taught. I'm completely self-taught, but I don't call myself a developer. I don't call myself a hacker either. But regardless, this is common. And as Billy said, I have books that'll show you queries like that, and then they'll say, in reality, you do a lot of extra security stuff. I swear. I swear a lot, in fact. Now, was that funny? Notice I have not signed the video release. Now, to test this, right, you throw the old single quote in there, which is the age-old SQL injection test. It's just one of different ways. And you see we get a database error message back. The reason this occurs is because the web application takes that 2%, the two single quote, the code takes it, slaps along the end of the query, and passes along to the database so that the query says select error message from error messages where error code equals 2 tick, right? and we get an ODBC error message back. Now the error message says unclosed quotation mark before character string tick, right? That's because a single quote or tick is a text delimiter in the SQL language. Therefore, it's expected in pairs. It's expected that error code equals single quote to single quote, right? User ID equals single quote, mat, single quote. When the SQL server gets an odd number of them, it throws up an error because it's unbalanced. Now, the error itself is a little bit pertinent. This is probably the most blatant error message when it comes to finding SQL injection. This is what people Google all the time. But the actual content of the error message doesn't matter as much as the fact that it comes from the ODBC layer. It comes from the database connectivity layer, not the web application layer. This is the database itself talking. So what this tells you is you put a completely invalid character into the web application. A single has absolutely no purpose in an integer field, right? The web application didn't sanitize it, filter it, validate it, whatever you want to call it. It took it, threw it against the database, then took the results from the database and printed the results back to the screen. Now in this case, the results were an error message, right? But that's irrelevant. This parameter in the query string, error code, now represents a two-way pipe to the back-end database. Whatever you put in there, within limits, the web application runs against the database and gives you results back. So what you have to do now is turn that from a broken query into a working query. The whole point of testing for SQL injection is to break the query, unless you're doing blind. It's a very different paradigm in blind. But when you're testing for verbose, which is the majority of SQL injection, you're literally just throwing junk in there to try and break the query. You can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do that with the classic single quote. You can do that with division errors, mathematical errors. You can do that by putting in a table name or a column name that doesn't make sense and look at the feedback you get. And again, this explains why the single quote is such an effective test. In reality, single quotes get filtered out quite a bit, but you can do other things. The same page, I throw in a blah after the two, and I get incorrect syntax near blah. It's an ODBC error message, which means that the word blah went to the database. I put in 2 and 1, and it says non-Boolean condition, right? I expect some sort of Boolean operator. Again, it's coming from the database. Script errors don't necessarily count. They might give you more clues to do stuff and try and get through to the database. But errors like this, typing errors especially, casting errors, come from the ASP environment or the web application, the PHP layer, not the database layer itself. So sometimes you'll go through like a single quote in something and you'll get a nice fat 500 back, you'll get the exception. But if it's not coming from the ODBC layer, it's not SQL injection. It might be, you just other tests. Once you find the ability to get unvalidated input into a database query, the goal then is to formulate something that makes sense to the database so it actually executes. Forming the useful query gets trickier. And let me caveat that all of these slides are pretty plain vanilla examples, right? SQL injection in reality gets very, very sophisticated very quickly. Especially when you start coming across random validators that mess up certain characters and not others. And it's one of those things that you have to kind of sit through and pull a lot of different SQL injection tools out of your box and play with to really get something through. But when it comes to vanilla, plain vanilla, straight up injections, there's plenty of them out there. A union operator works very easily, particularly against integers. And this is kind of the big argument against magic quotes. People believe that magic quotes actually breaks SQL injection. Does everyone know the full story behind magic quotes? Magic quotes was not built as a security function, right? I should have dug up the slides. 2 or 3 years ago at a law enforcement conference, I analyzed a worm. And the worm evaded magic quotes by doing a simple URL encoding. And I had slides of this interview with Rasmus Lerdoff where he explained where magic quotes came from. And it basically boiled down to I was going to get emails a day from people saying my queries break. Because people didn't realize that trying to insert a single quote into a database doesn't work. So magic quotes escapes them for you, and then you can use unescape functions. If you're injecting against an integer, you don't necessarily need to use single quotes for anything. In this particular example, I do, just to narrow the results of my query a little bit more, but I could have just as easily have left that off. When you go against an integer, in fact, when you go against any when you suspect you're coming up against the tail end of the query, you can use the union operator. Union is a highly reserved SQL keyword. right? That should really never be accepted by any part of an application that uses a dynamic SQL query, particularly an integer field. The union keyword tells the database to expect two separate queries, right? It literally prepares the database to get two separate queries, in which case normally it would send two different record sets back, but it tells it to union the record sets, merge them back into one record set, and display all the results back in one record set. Now, the reason you use a union operator isn't so much to merge the record sets back, it's because it lets you send two different queries. The first part of the query is going to be the hard-coded one in the code, in the ASP or the PHP that you can do nothing about. The second part, of course, is your own query. And that's literally piggybacking on top of the programmers and executing your own queries. The queries you would typically execute first are going to be reconnaissance queries, right? Understand the schema, figure out where the interesting things are, and zoom in on that. Doing that on more enterprise databases is usually pretty easy. They have things like system tables that you can enumerate. Again, MS Access doesn't, so you literally have to brute force table names unless you can get some schema out of the error messages. It's kind of a pain. In the case of MS SQL Server, you can pull sys objects out of any database, and it will enumerate all the tables in that database. You can go up to master and pull sys objects from that. You can pull sys database from master and look at all the databases on the server. Now, here's something interesting I discovered. On the job, after getting stumped a couple of times, I finally figured out why. Apparently, data reader and/or data writer can still enumerate master sys databases, so you can still see all the other databases on the server, but you can't traverse to them and use them unless that login also has permissions on those databases. But apparently, even if your login is mapped only to one database with just read-write privileges and no DBO or admin privileges, you can still enumerate the rest of the databases on the server, which could be sensitive. When you find the tables you're interested in, sysObjects returns table names. You can then get column names from syscolumns. Syscolumns key is called ID, and it relates directly to the field called ID in sysObjects. So you can go to sysObjects, get the list of tables called bank logins. If you want to get the columns for bank logins, you have to have the ID field for the bank logins field. You can do that just in a select and say, error code equals 2, union select ID from sysObjects, where name equals, quote, bank logins, end quote. Or you can do this as a subquery and say select name from syscolumns where the ID equals, subquery, select ID from sysObjects where name equals bank cards. Either one will work. Once you have that, you have the table name, you have the name, and then you can go straight to row-level data. Yeah, it's credit cards. The neat thing about this is on a plain vanilla setup, a relatively easy setup, you can be inside row-level data in as little as 4 packets. It's plenty easy to find the injections themselves, especially if they're not stripping single quotes. And you can pull the table names out of sysObjects, pull the column names out of syscolumns, 3 packets, and then hit row-level data right in 4 packets. If it's SSL, it might not even be monitored. Now, again, SQL injection gets tricky. There honestly is a lot of plain vanilla SQL injection out there still, but SQL injection does get tricky, so there's lots of different techniques you have to be aware of, and you're going to have to use them and mix and match them on the fly. Nothing's guaranteed to work. I don't want to say it's a complex exploit. It's certainly nothing like overflows, but certainly nothing as easy as like reading backup. In the example I used, the ASP code iterated through the entire record set. So all the results that came back from the database got printed to the screen. That doesn't always happen, and frankly, that was bad code for that example, because that example page only used one return. It used one error message, so it really shouldn't have looped through. If you change that code to just write one record, right, then you have a problem, because you got sysObjects and your table names, and you're only going to get one at a time, right? You can't get them all at once. Now, you can fix that by incrementing your queries. You can use Boolean operators against strings in SQL. MS SQL Server calls them varchars and nvarchars, not strings, but it's the same thing. So what you can do is restrict your first record to one result. And you want to make sure you get the top of the table. So you throw in a where clause, where 1 equals 1. And that's just, it's an old clause. It pulls back the first record, right? Then you get your first card number, social security number, login, whatever. You repeat the exact same query, but this time you throw in another where clause, you qualify a little bit further and say, this time I want you to pull back the next social card number that's greater than the one you just gave me. Greater than the one you just gave me. And sure enough, it brings back the next one on the table. And you just keep incrementing up that way. It can take a little bit of time. It certainly can be automated. One of the tools in our stuff automates the process. There are OS tools that do it, and certainly once you understand the methodology to SQL injection, it's easy enough to automate with Perl and wget. I want to make a quick note. This where 1 equals 1, if you have an IDS or an IPS, and they say they detect /block /eradicate SQL injection, take a look at the signatures. There's a lot of signatures out there where 1 equals 1. During pen tests, we don't do a lot of pen tests because we're a product company, not services, but during pen tests, we've come across devices and filters that were blocking things like where 1 equals 1. The evasion was really simple. Where 2 equals 2. The magic is not the words where 1 equals 1. The magic is a true condition. It could be where z is greater than a, where 55 is less than 1,000. So out your rule set, because there's actually a pretty decent chance that you have rules looking for literal expressions. Strings. There's no getting away from strings. You're going to have to deal with them at some point. And the way you deal with strings is by escaping out, right? Just like you do with script injection. In script injection, you have to escape out of tags. You have to escape out of other script blocks, or not. It's the same thing in SQL injection. In the first example, we were passing an integer back. So we could do a straight union. We didn't have to use any strings if we didn't want to. If we change this code to start passing a string, things get funky. Now, the way you pass a string is, first of all, the database has to be typed as a string. That column in the database has to be typed as an nvarchar. Otherwise, there'll be some explicit conversions going on. We'll talk about that later. Then your code has to do special things, right? Because if you stick the word mat into a database, it has to be wrapped in the single quotes. So now you start hard coding single quotes into your code. The original hard coding in the first example was select message from error messages where code equals. Then we just appended the request variable on there. Now we're going to be where code equals and a single quote. Now here it's 3 quotes in a row, but it's single quote and then end our ASP text line. And then the request object, and then we're going to start another ASP text line and throw quote in there. There should actually be a 4th in there. So now everything that comes from the request is going to be stuck between single quotes. That causes a bit of a problem because now if we throw in like a union clause, that in our whole second query gets stuck in between the quotes and sent to the database as a string. So the database will look for an error message called union select name from sysobjects. You get away from that by escaping your injection with single quotes, right? So we put a single quote in the front. We put a valid parameter in there, 2, and a single quote, our union clause, our query, and then we do the where 1 equals 1, right? Now we pass the string in. Now here, we're doing the where 1 equals 1. In the last example, we did where 1 equals 1, so we get returned 1 record, and then we can increment up from there. This time we're doing it for a slightly different reason. This time we're doing it because we need the string at the tail of our injection. Because we're going to we're going to throw a single quote at the beginning of that string, but not the end. The reason we do that is because we know there's going to be a single quote hard-coded into the code. So when this gets injected and sent into the clause, right, the programmer opens up a single quote, says error code equals something. I'm sorry. Forget this this blue. That's a mistake. The programmer code equals and inserts a single quote, right? Then we have the value 2 in our own single quote. So we closed out the programmer's opening quote. Then we have the injection, but we still have the programmer's closing quote to deal with. So we put in our own string and we leave our closing quote off, right? We get stuck in the middle, the programmer's closing quote gets stuck on the end of our string and closes out our string, and we nullify the programmer's closing quote at the same time. This this sort of escaping, right? This concept of doing things like putting things into breakout of tags and queries and closing things out is very, very common in injection attacks, whether they're script injections, HTML injections, SQL command, file traversals. It's kind of like padding in shellcode, I think. Very common techniques regardless, and you have to be familiar with techniques like this, even if you're not dealing with strings. Now, I talked about how we're doing the where clause here for a different reason. We're not doing the where 1 equals 1 to create a true condition and just pull up the first record in the table. We're doing the where 1 equals 1 to give it strings, right? So that we can intentionally leave off our trailing quote and have that closed by the programmer's code. So you don't have to use where 1 equals 1 here. Again, it can be anything. It can be any string in any combination that makes sense as a clause that gives you the ability to leave off that trailing quote and have it closed by the developer. A lot of times you get trapped in the middle of a query. Like you go into a column name and then there's a where clause behind it that has no dynamic input that you can't deal with, right? So error messages equals error code, and then browser input, and messages like error or some other undefinable term. You can break out using commas, dashes as a line comment. You can break out sometimes using semicolons, which is an end of line character. But this is a very common way of breaking out of those queries. You do your normal injection, and you throw a comment at the end, and that nullifies everything that comes after it. It nullifies the programmer's query, the rest of the programmer's query. If you don't do that, and you throw in the to union select card number from bank cards, right, you're going to get a pretty obvious error message that's going to tell you that you're doing something wrong. The quickest, easiest way you can get to an effective injection when you start getting error messages back saying something's wrong is throwing in commas, throwing in semicolons, right? Do your injection, throw in a semicolon at the end if you want, and throw some comment characters at the end, and start nullifying stuff off and reducing things to the basics. Conversion attacks are pretty neat. This is something I've been doing a little more work on. They're relatively new to a lot of people. They're new to me. I've been studying them myself. I don't want to say it's no day. I can't say it's no day because I seriously doubt I'm the first person to figure this stuff out. But SQL is a very strongly typed language, just as strongly typed as .NET or anything else. If that database column is typed as an integer, it wants an integer in there. If it's typed as a float, right, it wants a float. You can do explicit conversions, and the database will automatically do lots of implicit conversions for you, which are very interesting. Explicit conversions can be done in two different places. You can do it in the SQL code so that your PHP or ASP passes whatever, and the SQL converts it to the proper data type. Or you can do it in the ASP code, which honestly is the better way to do it. There's a lot of different reasons to do it in the ASP versus in the SQL. First of all, you don't want to be passing bad data types off to your database server, even if it is going to fix that for you, right? You want everything to be very controlled and rigid, but it also gives you the ability to trap errors. It's a very good validation technique. If this application expects integers, but it takes any form of input, a really good way to do validation when it comes to database queries is reduce everything into integers as much as you can. Use lookup tables and hash tables and the sort, as opposed to taking strings, and then cast things to an integer, right? If your application expects an integer, cast it to an integer. If it fails the casting, it's obviously not valid input. But either way, you have to have data in the correct format. Now, these conversion tricks are definitely an MS SQL Server thing. I don't think these will work on any other servers. The old convert attack has been documented for a while. This is the only conversion trick most people know about, and I learned about the other conversion tricks. I was forced to learn the other conversion tricks on jobs where I couldn't get convert to work for one reason or another. But convert is an explicit convert, right? The method signature is convert, data type, comma, value, or expression. This is the interesting part, or expression. So I can give it a string that actually has a number as the string, a string of 1, and tell it to convert to an integer, and it will convert that string 1 to the int 1. I can convert the nvarchar. Here's an integer, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can tell it turn this back into a string instead, and it will do that, right? It's the same value, but it's a different data type now. Now, if you tell it to convert from one format to another that's incompatible, it will give you an error. So if I give it a string and I tell it to convert this string to an integer, it fails. Now, the original string here, this is what I did here, but the string's value actually is an integer. So this isn't the right allegory, but it kind of strips off the single quotes, so to speak. Let me make this an integer. Oh, it's the number 1. Yes, I can make this an integer. If you try to do that with something that is not a number, it fails. But this is where it gets interesting, because when it fails, it tells you what it failed to convert. It said, hey, I can't convert this word fish into a number. It's a word, not a number, right? And that's where it gets good, because the convert command will work with a value like this or an expression like this. You can give it a query and tell it to convert the results of that query into an integer. And it obviously can't do that. When you do select top 1 name from sysobjects, the result is going to be something like credit cards or bank logins, right? And it can't turn that into an integer, so it fails, and it tells you what it couldn't convert. It says, I failed to convert the value bank logins to a number, right? And it's great information linkage. Now, it only works on one field at a time. So you have to modify things with the top 1 name and then use the incrementing tricks to roll through the table. But it works beautifully. And the great thing about converts is they're small, and they'll work in areas that other things don't work. I can't give you like real specific examples of characters and places and the sort. But generally, when I'm having trouble with injections and things just aren't making sense, I can fall back to a convert, and it'll just work. It's a great standby. I did a job once where a convert wouldn't work. They were stripping out commas. Not quotes, not parentheses, not union or select or where, but commas, and only commas. And it was frustrating as could be, because I tried to do a union attack, and the union attack failed. When you do a union attack, you have to select the same amount of fields that the programmer did. It's just like an algebraic equation. Both sides of that equation have to balance out. And if you don't know how many fields they selected, you have to start counting. You have to say, okay, union select name from sysobjects. And you can actually select the same field twice and say select name, 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 and keep counting up. Or you can select strings, right? Which is actually kind of neat, because if you do get it all to come back, you can see exactly where the records are placed in the HTML. But either way, you have to count up until your column number counts the programmer's column number, and you can only do that with commas. So I tried counting up in my union attack, and they were stripping these out so that my query made no sense at all, and it stumped me. It was frustrating because it was a really crappy website. It was really poorly done. It was blatantly bad, and I was getting stumped because of commas. Now, if someone stripped out quotes and that gave me trouble, that'd be one thing. If they were stripping out like certain keywords, that'd be. But I know they weren't stripping commas as a security technique. It was some functional problem they had where someone said, oh, we can't let people put commas in there. But sure enough, it was giving me a hell of a time. So I switched back, right? I fell back to the convert attack. But sure enough, look at the method signature of convert, right? So I'd say convert, and everything would come out as, and the error message would show me this. This is a good way to test validators, because the ODBC error message would actually say, makes sense, and you get to see what actually got sent to the database after validators. So my converts were coming out like this, right? So that didn't work. So I had to think fast, and this was on site with them watching me after I'd talked a lot of smack, which I do less of. If you saw, like at ShmooCon, a lot of smack at ShmooCon. I figured something out. I'll get to it after this slide because I forgot this slide was here. The neat thing about converts too is you can use it to tell what the data type of a column is. You can say select top 1 error code from error messages. I go to sysobjects. I see that there's a table I'm interested in. I go to syscolumns. I see there's multiple columns. Maybe I want to know what the error code column is. I need to figure out what the data type is. So I try and select top one error code, and it comes back and then says, I can't convert into text, right? So now I know that the error code field is defined as an integer. Nice side effect. Lots of interesting behaviors in these conversion tricks that give a lot of information out. Gosh, I hope I have my cast slide in here. Getting numeric values is a little trickier, and this is an area I'm still working on. Let's see, here I tried to convert the error code, right, to an integer, which I just learned the error code is an integer. And so now I say bring back that error code value and convert it to an integer, right? And so what does the database do? It converts it to an integer. It works. So there's no error message. I get the record set back, which is a field name. And that's a problem because the whole reason for using the convert is to have it convert things that doesn't work and breaks, and the injection works. So there are some tricks you can do with that though. Depending on the size of the number in the field, you can try to convert it to a smaller type of number. Integers can go, as you can see, can go pretty darn high. But you have small ints, which are actually not all that small either. And then you have tiny ints, which can go as high as 255. So if you're dealing with large numbers, card numbers, social security numbers, you can try and convert those down to a tiny int. And sure enough, when you overflow that field, it comes back and says, I can't convert this to a tiny int because you're trying to give me a number that doesn't fit, right? Too big for my bucket. So that works. If it doesn't overflow and the conversion actually works and you get the proper page back, that tells you the value is less than 255 because it fit inside the tiny int. I'm not sure of a way around this. I actually tried doing double conversions. It doesn't work. I tried saying, select this error code and convert it to an nvarchar and then convert that to an int. And it didn't fall for that. I tried saying, select top one error code and and add 255. That didn't work either. So I'm still working on a way around this. The cast function. When convert could not work for me, I did some digging. SQL Books Online, right? You have those on your hard drive. They're actually really good. And I found that there's another method called cast. Cast does the exact same thing that convert does, but it has a different signature. Now it's cast value or expression as data type, no columns. I used that, it worked. It gives the exact same error message. And that's where I realized that it's not the function. The old convert attack has nothing to do with the word convert. It's the conversions, it's the library itself that does it. And then I started doing implicit conversions, which is where the database does conversions for you. And so I figured that you didn't even have to use words like convert or cast. You can do much more subtle things. You can throw stuff directly into queries. You can take things that would return nvarchars and try and do mathematical operations on them. Or just take nvarchars, and if the field is typed as like an int, it will try to implicitly convert to an int, and all of those will fail and give you the error messages back. At Black Hat, I got to speak to a guy at MS about this, and he was actually all over it. And there's a trace flag you can set that's supposed to suppress the schema leakage in these messages. I'm going to talk with him about trying to get that pushed by default because I consider this stuff to be debugging information. I don't think this is something that needs to be turned on by default. I think this is something you turn on as you're building an application to figure out why your queries are building. But the trace flag is 3625. You can throw it in your SQL.exe line statement when you start the server, or you can execute it at runtime. When you execute at runtime, you have to follow the trace flag with a -1 to set it globally. Otherwise, it's just session-based. All right, more fun with SQL injection. Now it gets funner. But this is all fun, right? Yeah. I'm so sad. More SQL injection. I have 15 minutes, and I'm telling you now, I'm going long. Select statements. Remember, SQL injection, arbitrary database commands. Select statements for learning, and learning how to form the queries and do this stuff. In the wild, certainly you do selects, but people do a lot more than selects. Select is part of CRUD, change, remove, update, delete. It's a minuscule portion of what you do in the SQL language. It's really a very small amount of what you do in the language. A good DBA can build the database, manage the database, admin the database, and eventually kill the database all from T-SQL statements, right? And so can a good attacker. You can do things like shut down the database, right? This is new. There's no quotes, there's no union, there's no select, because it's not a query, it's a command, right? So you can shut down the database without any of the things that your newfangled IDS might be looking at. You can drop the database. When you drop the database, it deletes the devices from the file system. You can enumerate who you're logged in as. Now, the bad part about this is to do this, you have to be SA. But if you are SA, it's real easy to tell. You can add your own logins if you're SA. You can port scan. This is a cool technique. You can do... So now there's two different ways you can port scan from internal networks. One is SQL injection. One is the Ajax visited the Ajax hacking stuff. You open there's a command called open record set, open row set, which tells database A that as part of its plan to execute the query, it needs to talk to database B. When you do that, you have to give it the connection string to database B. I give it a connection string. I tell it that database B lives on yahoo.com on port 80, which is an open port, right? At least 5 nines. We still get a network error message. That's okay. We get a network error message because ODBC error messages are painfully cryptic, but that's all right. We tell it to connect to a database on a closed port, and we get a different error message. So we have one error message when the port's open, or one response when the port's open, a different response when the port's closed. You script that and you're port scanning, right? You increment the ports, you change the IPs, and you're port scanning from the database. Not from you, not from the website, scanning from the back-end database behind 4 pairs of firewalls and IDSs. Why 4 pairs when there's only 2 layers? You have to have 2 devices. You have to have failover and HSRP and VERP and stuff like that. Why? Twice the commission. I have not signed the release for the video. Some neat things, you can get a sysobjects and query for name values and card operators to restrict them to certain things. So you can do select name from sysobjects, where name is like reg. The % is a wildcard in SQL. And sure enough, 30 different stored procedures and extended stored procedures that do registry operations. Someone was asking me earlier on the balcony, I'm interested in the rooting stuff, going beyond the table, like getting into the box and going back on from that, right? Well, this is definitely one way you can do it. You can get inside the registry. Here's stuff that deals with logins. Change user logins, add remote login. Get MS login mappings and see which Active Directory logins are mapped to which SQL logins. Get is valid Windows login from distributor. Dropped link server logins. And there's actually a lot of stuff that interacts. These are just a couple examples, but I mean, you go through and start reading, start looking through sysobjects yourself and just scrolling and selecting things, reading books online. There's a lot of interaction with the operating system and with Active Directory available to you. And I'm sure it's the same case with Oracle and DB2, because these are all high-end enterprise databases, and they need those sort of capabilities in there for the enterprise management stuff. Input validation, again, is not a fix for SQL injection, but it's a thing to have. Rummy had some awesome advice on input validation. I got to use this slide inside the Pentagon. It rocked, and they laughed too. He said there are things you know, there are things you don't know, and then there's things you don't even know you don't know. I said it shorter, but the same thing. So what he's basically talking about is blacklisting versus whitelisting. Now, I think he's talking about different stuff, but it pertains to blacklisting versus whitelisting. A lot of stuff out there actually blacklists. A lot of proxies blacklist. A lot of devices blacklist. They may not necessarily do it properly. They might be using literals instead of regexes. Their regexes might not be anchored properly. Regexes are tough to build right. At SPY, we do a lot of regexes. They can be painful, and when you mess them up, it's painful. One way, I did a site once where based on the error messages, I could tell that they're stripping out the words union and the words select. When you blacklist, you have a decision to make. Do I remove the unwanted characters or phrases? Do I escape them, or do I reject the request altogether? I prefer rejecting the request altogether. Here I could tell they were simply removing. So what I did is I wrapped union inside union. Duh. Last time we did it was, Billy, this was with John, and I found this. It was a proxy. Something was breaking like union select, but it was looking for union select, not union and or select. So we did a union select with a comment in between, and we just closed our comment between the union and select. It broke the pattern. It went through. Whitelisting, right, regular expressions. Everyone says regular expressions. If you have a wide open format, you're kind of stuck blacklisting. A relatively closed format, you have to accept regexes are really good. If you're accepting input from, if you're accepting input from like selects and radio buttons and checkboxes, right? Don't use regexes, use switches and select case, right? If you know what the values of the input are supposed to be, check against a list of the known values. If you built a bunch of checkboxes here, and the checkbox values are A, B, C, D, E, right? Or well, Ford, Pontiac, right? Do a switch against Ford and Pontiac. Don't bother trying to come up with a regex that matches those. You won't. Don't bother trying to cast them to things, they're strings. One of the best things you can do as a validator is trimming the length. Not enough people do that. In the examples I showed on the little bank website, the error code was one integer, values 1 through 8, exactly 1 character wide, but yet I was able to put in any length I wanted, right? That's a very real situation on many, many web applications. No one trims the length, it seems. And there's a lot of easy ways to figure out how long the length should be. First of all, you always have that database column, right? Because I'm talking about SQL injection now, so I don't have to worry about scripts and stuff like that. When it comes to validating input into your queries, right, that input can be no longer than the database is, right? You can't put 51 characters into a default 50-character nvarchar column. It doesn't work. You'll get a message that says data would be truncated. I'm not going to put it in. Easy way. You can also look at your HTML field widths, right? If the interface is only supposed to accept 10 characters, but you got 20 back instead, someone's not using the interface. If you suppress error messages without fixing the problem, then you get what's called blind SQL injection. I took the same page, I changed the HTML a little bit. I'm lazy. I should have changed the colors. Different, but I put the single quote in there. It doesn't work, and that's because I threw in an on-air resume next, and then I made it even trickier. Now I don't even write record sets back to the screen. Right now, all I do is I run the query, and if something is returned from the query, I write the words in stock, but I don't write the value that was returned to the query. Right, so it's a tough challenge. What you can test in these cases, right, is using this technique. This is only one technique. Blind SQL injection involves a lot of human deduction. The techniques can be timing-based, they can be port-based, socket-based, file-based. This is only one technique, but the paradigm is the same. You try and create some sort of Boolean logic in the application, a true, false, a yes, no, that you can use to deduce things. You can do that in this case by using an AND clause. The product type equals 1 and 1 equals 0. Now, 1 does not equal 0. In about 4.5 hours, it's going to. But right now, 1 does not equal 0. So it doesn't return anything back, right? We don't get the words in stock. Now, the question here, though, is why don't we get the words in stock back? Is it because the application looked at this and said, wait a minute, you're putting too much in there, I don't like it? Or is the application still letting it go through, but now the database sees it and says 1 equals 0, that doesn't work, I have nothing to give you? You don't know that, but you can put a true clause in there and make it say 1 equals 1, right? And this time we get the words in stock. So that tells us that wasn't the application filtering out, because if it were, the application would have filtered this as well. Now we know that the application still sends it to the database, but now that makes sense. We get results back. Either way, we have a Boolean logic we can use. We can use this switch to start guessing at table names, right, until we have a table name we like. Then we can use it to guess at column names. But you can only guess at one letter at a time. You don't want to guess really long words like bank logins because you'll be guessing forever. You want to guess like A, B, C, D. You can use the substring command for that. Substring is just like substring in other languages. You give it a string or an expression, you tell it where to start and how many characters to return. So you do a substring of your expression, right, and you return one character, and you stick that into the clause. So now you say, is the product type 2 and the first character of select top objects is greater than the letter M? And it says no. If it's not greater than the letter M, it must be less than the letter M, right? So you bracket again, and eventually you arrive at the first letter of the first table name in sysobjects. And from there, you just increment your substring to get the second character, the third character, the fourth character, and you get the entire table name. Then you go back and you start at the first character again, and you increment your select statement. Select top one name from sysobjects where x type equals u and 1 equals 1, and name is greater than the one you just gave me. And that gets you all the information. So I have 5 minutes left. This is going to be fast. SQL injection is caused by concatenation, not input validation. The way you fix it is parameterized queries, not stored procedures. You can concatenate variables into stored procedures when you call them, and you can mess up your stored procedures on the database. The use of procedures by itself is not a fix for SQL injection. What? Sorry.
A lot of times, there are certain types of queries, like search engine queries, when you're saying like, search Google for free and porn and Paris Hilton. You're dynamically building a where clause. You cannot write a stored procedure to do that without having dynamic SQL.
Right.
So a lot of people say stored procedure, that takes care of it. It doesn't.
Yeah, you have to parameterize, and you have to pass your parameters properly, substituting the parameters opposed to concatenating them. And this code here just initializes them. Well, how come it's not request password, request name? Well, because first I checked for null values and lengths and stuff like that, right? Mitigating SQL injection. This is really, really big. Most web applications have very distinct portions to them, very distinct modules. Each of those modules can very well log into the database with different logins and different permissions, but nobody does it. Don't have your web app login as SA. I know it's stupid, right? If a company greater than, like, say 500 people, I guarantee you one of your web apps is logging in as SA right now. It happens all the time. Obviously, test your site for SQL injection. Be careful what you test with. If you use a tool to test your site, make sure it's a good tool. If you use people to test your site, make sure they're good people. There are tools out there that aren't so good, and it's really easy to fall into a false sense of security. You can set an option to disallow ad hoc queries, i.e. disallow concatenated queries from the code or command text from the code and force it to use stored procedures on the server. Now that doesn't fix anything, but it does at least put all of your queries in one location where you can scrutinize them. Things you can do to make instant responses much less painful after now having started helping some folks out with instant responses. Number one, make sure your web server is logging everything. Go into IIS, go into Apache, whatever you use, check all the boxes. Don't leave anything out. Keep your exception logs and back them up and store them. Don't erase them, right? Keep them for a certain amount of time. If your daemon doesn't log exceptions for you, instrument your code and log exceptions. Make sure your web server logs extensions. Put IDS signatures that look for 500s going out, that look for ODBC error messages going outbound. They're good alerts. The biggest thing I can say is if you get hit with SQL injection, unless the field used was actually a get, your web server logs will be next to useless. The only logs that are useful are transaction logs from the database itself, and those aren't things that people usually store. And again, this being learned after real life pain. Back up your transaction logs and treat them as something you have to keep on hand for X number of days. Unfortunately, transaction logs from a SQL server are a binary format, but there are some commercial log viewer tools that will let you go in and read them, reconstruct things. Even the transaction logs don't log everything. In fact, there's a lot they don't log. STFU? All right, let me fly through these. 5 at most. Okay, well they should come in. This is the funny stuff now. So that's the end of the SQL injection. All right. I usually don't talk just on SQL injection. I usually talk on web app security as a whole. And one of the things I always like to do is kind of wrap up the last couple of months in web application security, because there's always something new and exciting happening. Late last year, December 29th, as a matter of fact, the NSA made CNN for using persistent cookies. Now, persistent cookies aren't a security issue at all, but the federal government forbids their use. The White House Office of Management and Budget forbids anyone in the federal government from using persistent cookies because they're that scared of the perception of the government tracking citizen communications. Come on, NSA. All right. Damn. So December 29th, 2005, not to be done, one day later, the White House themselves announced that they also use persistent cookies. They made Fox News. The state of Rhode Island. How many people are familiar with this one? How many people are from Rhode Island? Yeah, you are, of course. Anyone here from Rhode Island? Yeah, didn't think so. Cool, well, I can talk on this. The state of Rhode Island got owned, gave up a bunch of credit card numbers. They violated the #1 rule of incident response. The #1 rule of incident response is make no assurances, right? Make no assurances because someone will prove you wrong. They came back and said, well, the card numbers were encrypted, and we've always been compliant to PCI. We always will be. Therefore, this is irrelevant, right? So I decided to actually look up PCI, and it turns out even at the lowest tier, they have to do this little self-assessment questionnaire every quarter. So I looked at the self-assessment questionnaire, and it's actually pretty decent, right? It's a hell of a lot better than DISCAP. Are egress and ingress filters being used, right? And egress filters. Payment stored in a database that is not in the DMZ. Are you building your applications according to generally accepted, web app security guidelines? Are you doing things to prevent SQL injection, right? Vulnerability scan of the systems and applications, pretty decent. So if this spokesperson's quote was accurate, then these would all be checked off, yes. And this Russian website would be completely bogus. And it might be, I don't know. I can't read Russian, I can't really evaluate that well. SQL injection sure looks real. And the SSHing back to themselves looks pretty real. The passwords, I don't know, do Russians get, who is it, Pinky in the brain, yeah, thanks. That part looked pretty real. The credit cards were encrypted though, with a black box on the Russian website. There's actually, there's a screenshot in here somewhere, well there was, of him using the decryption functions in the PHP to decrypt the cards. So I don't have to tell you guys, right? Encryption is only as strong as the PKI underneath it. If the key's on your web server, I guess you can still check that little box. Card system solution, I can't even say they got owned. They got nuked about 1.5 years ago. We all know them, right? Everyone here knows Card System Solutions, right? Come on, seriously. Everybody's got it, yeah. Right, we have tattoos, right? No, because seriously, this is where like half of all of our work came from the last 1.5 years, the whole industry. They got owned, they had the class action, they had to testify to the House of Reps, right? Earlier this year, there's a statement made that was SQL injection. Someone got inside the database, started sweeping tables and putting them in a dead drop. I have no way of evaluating if this is true or not, but it sounds feasible. This is off the Web Application Security Consortium's incidents database. This is my favorite one. And look at this. Oh, where's Brian? Is he here? December 2005, December last year. Guidance Software, who makes Encase, the forensic software, got owned. They had their credit cards in the clear with the verification codes, which is a big negative. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do a lot of work with law enforcement, gun toters, stuff like that, right? A lot of agents, and there's this one conference I speak at every year that's nothing but special agents, right? Gun toters, and they all use Encase, and there were a bunch of them there who had their card numbers leaked out. The beautiful thing about this was, right, the more negligent you are in an incident, in an information assurance incident, the more negligent you are, the stronger you respond to stuff, right? We got defaced, let's send in the Secret Service. Because you have to keep people from looking too hard. So there's a quote in here that says, we're definitely working with the Secret Service on this. Yeah, you are. you lost their numbers. This year, I speak in January, which is right after this happened. I so wanted to hack the website for the agents. What I ended up showing them how to build their wireless to a different room. But I really wanted to show them play by play, like here's how it happened. But I couldn't. When this happened, me and another guy in our company hit the website. We do this every time something like this comes out. Was it web app or not? No, we don't audit it. We don't test it. But we certainly browse it. And we found, I found this PHP forum board in the support section. And if you've done web app security for more than, say, 6 minutes, you know how bad PHP message boards can be. And so this definitely looked right. I went to download it, but guess what? It's actually not open source. They paid for this PHP message board. And it's called UBB Threads. And so I couldn't download it and play with it. And I wasn't going to like fake a company and do try and get an eval copy or anything. I don't do that. But I did search Secunia for it, and Secunia came back with 4 open injections on it, 2 SQL injections. So maybe that's how it was done. So obviously, don't use PHP message boards for commercial work unless you really have to. Certainly don't pay for them. And then just go ahead and make sure there's no like glaring SQL injection vulnerabilities listed on them. I'm gonna get faster, Hikari. Some DoD stuff. This is some of the lighter DoD stuff. If you've seen me at DoD specific shows, I show some bad stuff. The Army earlier this year decided that there's a logistical problem with families going to airports and waiting for their kids to come home from overseas, not knowing if the flight was delayed, what flight they were on, and jamming everything up. So they contracted out to a company to build a website where you could go see when Johnny was coming back from overseas, right? I call this the convenience of knowing troop movement plans and mode plans without all the inconvenience that goes into human intelligence collection. The flight numbers were coded, and if you put in your phone number, they would SMS updates to you for those who didn't have convenient internet access, like the guy in the grass. Now, are people hanging around airports a problem? Obviously, we patrol perimeters looking for people going into airports, right? Oh, by the way, they also fingerprinted themselves in the article. They told every single technology they used in that web application. So I bet you Kaminsky can't even do this. I fingerprinted them offline remotely, right? So there's no way you could go sit in the grass at an airport there, right? They'd find you. In Chicago earlier this year, a drunk 24-year-old spent 6 minutes between 2 tarmacs before they caught him. 6 minutes, drunk, at 24 years old, at Midway. Here's some more lighthearted DoD stuff. Intelligence and Security Command, I don't know, maybe a little important. They have this one group unit called the National Ground Intelligence Center. I'm not sure exactly what they do. They probably hump GPRSs all over the place, but they have the words national and intelligence centers in their names. And the first thing I saw at this website that kind of struck me as odd was the Pat Roberts Intelligence Scholarship Program. The second thing that struck me as odd was the URL, avenue.org/NGIC. And I thought, wow, haven't seen that one before. So I used one of my favorite hacking tools, this little guy right here, and I went up one directory, and guess what they host the National Ground Intelligence Center on? The Jefferson Madison Regional Library System. But that library system actually doesn't allow front page extensions, unlike DISA. If you're a services company and you're going out there selling application services and you're going to use a timestamp for your session ID, at least sync your clocks up. So that's the end. That's the end of the Wax Museum. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for going a little over.
Oh, no. And we just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for talking with us. We want to get your slides, obviously. We'll be doing the closing ceremonies in just milliseconds as soon as Dave shows up. So if everyone... Get your ass up here. Yeah, okay, Bunny? Well, I was going to get you to pimp your talk tomorrow, but apparently on speakerphone it doesn't work too well from the airport, so... Yeah. Okay. Bunny will be here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for his talk. So hope that those of you that are signed up will be here, and he will see you then. All right. Joe Grand. Tag teams, so they actually stand outside of the arena of introduction, and they would just like slap each other as they come in and come out. That would rock. Provided we can get the Mexican wrestler masks on them. Dave, we're ready? Well, I want to thank you all for staying this long. We've actually got a really good attendance for, it's the end of the con, it's Sunday night, it's late, and there are a lot of you here. How many of you are staying? Well, go ahead, Juan, clap. Keep clapping. Yeah, there you go, there you go, there you go. How many are staying until tomorrow? Or live here. You'll be here for a while. Okay, those of you that don't have an airplane to catch in the next couple of hours, we will have a party later on that apparently we have a little bit of booze left for and a little bit of food. So we'll give you more information on that later on tonight. But there is an after party. There's plenty of time for you guys to go out and find a nice restaurant, the Gas Lamp. How many people have actually been using the guide in the back of the program for restaurants? Okay, there's like 4 of you. The rest of you have been eating at McDonald's or? What program? Oh, okay, no, we run this thing called ToorCon, and we actually like have a bunch of talks, and there's like a program that we produce that goes with it, that near the end of it. Now, we have a bunch of restaurants included in the guide on page 14 that we tried this year in response to last year when we didn't have a lot of info about where one could get something to shove in your food hole. And hopefully this year you guys actually use this resource. Did people? No, 4 of you use this. Okay, fine.
You cut into Matt's bio for nothing.
No, I didn't cut into it. I just squished it aside. There's a difference. There's a difference. So. But yeah, I want to thank you all for staying so late, and actually, honestly, for a con to have this kind of attendance at the close of ceremonies is near phenomenal. Because, I mean, we have, a few seats left open, but that's about it, and a bunch of people standing. Most people would have, figured, screw it, I'm out of here by now. I'm, way too hungover, I have to go home, I need my own bed. And they're gone, but yet we still have a full room full of people, so. But I wanted to start off by actually thanking every one of you for showing up tonight. I'm going to save the best for last. Hikari's going to talk in a few minutes, but we're going to save him until after I'm done droning on and on and on and on. But actually, Hikari, come here. Putting on a con's a little bit of a work, and I just want to make sure that Hikari has the shot with me at the end of the con, just for the effort that goes into this. So, excuse me for a moment.
You do realize that now he's going to ramble on for a couple hours.
Yeah.
As long as
All
the
right.
bottle lasts.
Every shot increases my rambling by 10 minutes. So as long as you know that. But first and foremost, we can't produce a con like this without a room full of people like you. And it does my heart good to see how many fucking people are here at this point in time. It's like Sunday night. Presumably a lot of you might have jobs. There's like a Monday morning issue. But you're here in town, and you're hanging out with us. And, we absolutely love that. And we cannot do a con like this without you guys. So first and foremost, I have to thank you guys for showing up here, for being part of this, for sharing this experience with us. So thank you guys for showing up. I have to... I've heard a lot of wonderful comments all weekend long about how the talks have been running, and people have been pulling me aside talking about their favorites and what they liked, and it does me so well just to hear what you guys are having a positive response to the talks that we have here. And if there is, for example, a talk that you really liked a lot, or for example, a talk that you weren't able to see, or a talk that you really wanted to see, again, we've got the guy here that's been running around like a crazy maniac doing all the videos. He's got them for sale for 20 bucks a pop, and they're almost instantaneous. Like literally like an hour after the talk, they're out there on DVD, which is insane. I don't understand how he does this, but he does this. So you can buy the talks singly, 20 bucks a pop, I think like 7 or more, it's like 15 bucks, something like that. You get a volume discount. You can buy a con for probably around maybe twice what your badge costs, but you got to carry it with you and redistribute it on BitTorrent without any of us knowing what's going on. But no, actually, he's going to be distributing the talks also on Google with a pay-per-view kind of a setup. 3 bucks a pop is what I've heard. I don't know. It'll be a couple of weeks before we find out. But it's just fantastic that we have this kind of information that's available, not only for you guys that are here, but that you can share with anyone else that you want to, or you can just review at will. So, but I do want to take a few minutes to thank a few people. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. We do this, hopefully we do this well. We do this, fine enough that we make it look good, we make it look simple, but we do have a handful of like sister cons that are out there that have been working their way up to the grounds that we really want to just promo the heck. And we've got Shmoo, Rodney, calling your ass. We have a handful of sister cons that I want to take a second or two to give these people a chance to talk about their cons. And Rodney's here to talk about Shmoo first off.
So there's a problem with ToorCon. You can't go to the next one for about 360 days. So we're going to have this March 23 to 25. We're going to do ShmooCon again. It's not in January. I'm sorry, big hotels, contracts, la 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 la. Anyway, so we're doing, it smells like alcohol up here. I can't imagine why. Gonna get drunk. I don't need to drink anything. Oh, he's gonna hand me one now. So we're doing it again. The call for papers, cheers. Yeah, right. What the hell is this?
Observa de Familia.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's good. We're gonna do this again 25th of March. Call for papers is open. There will be online registration any day now. We have all the back-end plumbing, which means all you spooks in the crowd, you can now pay us with credit cards. PayPal won't take your credit card, but we will. We promise we'll only use it once. But anyway, that's not quite set up. That'll be set up in a few days. And we're going to do a sliding scale with, it's going to have 1,000 people this year, which is a little bigger than last year. Hopefully it's not going to get too big. We're trying to control that carefully. We're trying to get interest. If you think you did something cool, got something cool to talk about, please, we want your submissions. If you haven't talked at a con before, that's fine. We want to encourage people in the community to actually be able to talk. So it's not, we're not trying to, grow 16,000 Dan Kaminsky clones. We're trying to actually have, multiple people talking lots of things. Is Dan here? Yep. Dan's over there. Hi, Dan. No. Well, there's only one of them there. I mean,
none of us.
It's like Waldo.
Want Kaminsky clones. None of us want Kaminsky clones. One is enough.
No, you're also supposed to start ranting, Danbo. But anyway, anyway, and it's it's on the other left coast. It's in D.C. In case you haven't been there before. And let's see, anything else I can say about it? We're trying to have the con community is trying to work together on these things. So we're trying to support you guys and really appreciate what you're doing. And yeah, you make it look easy, which really sucks because it's really hard to run one of these things. And these guys do a lot of work and deserve a lot of appreciation. I think we'll applaud again now. There you go. Go to ShmooCon.
Yeah, I would like to add, no matter how much they try, we have less moose than they do, entirely across the board. So, actually, Richard, where are you? Oh, there you go. We have another SisterCon that is actually happening up in the San Francisco area on Wednesday.
We're doing the con.
Actually, Interzone West has now been rebranded as Security Opus. They're happening again on Wednesday, and you know, the con is just so fucking good. It's happening again in March. So you've got 2 chances to hit them up in a little while, but let me give Richard a chance to talk about that.
Hi guys. First, I have to say I was at ShmooCon last year. That rocked. So if you can make the flight and all that, it's worthwhile. So do that. It's not like a love fest. It's just kicked ass. And I only came up here because I wanted a shot too. But okay. So we're having the shindig at the W Hotel in San Francisco this week. It's a very abbreviated show this year because there's so many conferences in San Francisco, I couldn't get the space. So it's a 2-day show. Tried to pack in a lot of good talks. Some of the same speakers here are going to do other extended edition presentations up there, and it's been a good time. We had a good time last time. Working on trying to just do a couple kick-ass parties at night too. We'll see if that'll be a surprise thing. And then we're going to move to. I was negotiating with Bruce, and we're looking at maybe doing the March program, but I'm going to segment it about 2 weeks before yours. Give people time to recover, because I'll run you into the ground because we'll have more parties. And we'll have a good time. Thanks.
And actually, Hugo? Hugo? Oh, there we go. And, you know, we actually have another sister con that is within at least this segment of the globe, but happens to be outside the boundaries of the digital, DMCA. And Hugo runs this. So actually, a lot of the things that you couldn't talk about in the US, you'll have a chance to talk about up in Canada, eh? So let me give Hugo a chance to introduce his con and talk about it for a second.
Oh, I was planning to start with the shot, so.
Start and finish with the shot.
Okay, so.
Making up a con so they can come up and have a shot.
Yeah, as long as it is legitimate, I'll make a shot for you. We'll step on
So-
the stage.
Recon is a 3-day conference in Montreal. It's good. It's fun. Okay, so it's a 3-day conference in Montreal. We focus on reverse engineering, technical topics. Anything that you cannot do in US, come do it in Montreal. I don't really have a lot to talk about Recon, but it's in June. It's in June in Montreal. A lot of party. It's a really good time of the year to visit Montreal. So it's all about the party.
All right, we have here from, damn, who do we have here from Layer 1? It's late enough in the, okay, all right, step up. You know, those LA bastards want to like beat traffic, so they've already gone home. Oh, Sunday night traffic? No, they're trying to beat it so they don't have to deal with all that shit. But apparently at least there's one person that doesn't have to deal with that crap. So Layer 1 is our sister con up in Los Angeles. Pasadena again?
Yeah, it's in Pasadena.
Pasadena. So it's just in our neck of the woods, hop, skip, and a jump away from us, and give you a chance to intro it.
Sure, okay. I'm completely unprepared. My name is Zink. For those of you who may not know me, there's probably about 4 of you. In any case, yeah, Layer 1 is going on this year on Cinco de Mayo. Because ShmooCon moved up their schedule, we decided we didn't want to bounce everyone from the East Coast back to the West Coast in like 2 weeks, because your bosses aren't going to. So we're going to be on Cinco de Mayo this coming year, Pasadena Hilton, and that's basically we're another information security conference similar to ToorCon. In fact, Datagram, who spoke this con, has also spoken at Layer 1. We also focus on industry regulation, some of the more technical sides of legal implementations, yada, yada, yada. All information is up at layer1.info, not .com. And yeah, hope to see you all there. Bye. body's like burning.
Nice Ralph Wiggum. So basically, you know, we've got Security Opus coming up next week, and then again in March, and then I think Shmoo is next. Oh. You guys just want booze.
Yeah.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
Oh, we want to. we want to introduce a new con.
Yeah, it's a good venue. It's called ConCon, and and we'll tell you about it in just about a minute. No, we're kidding. We just want the shot.
He's up here. You need to make him talk now.
There you go.
No, you need.
No, go ahead.
Well, that really was it. We just wanted the shot.
That's it. We just wanted the liquor.
Well, that's empty. Don't hand it back to me empty. That's just wrong.
There you go. Sorry. Actually, not really.
All right. Anyone else want to make up a con? Well, no, we know not to believe Billy just from the get-go. Yeah, no. Do not trust this man because he will do anything for booze.
Actually, no, I have two. Matt and I were researchers by day and researchers by night, and then somewhere in between we're corporate whores. So there is a conference called SpyCon, which because Dynamics, it's a web security thing. I think we're opening it up because a lot of our customers, they're already flying down to see us all the time. So if you go to spydynamics.com, you can see it. I also have to tell you about Freaknik, which is held in Nashville. It's in October. And if you thought that, don't get me wrong, ToorCon, everything else is a con. Freaknik has a single track. My topic last year was about writing a file system on top of tinyURL, and I was drinking the entire time I gave the talk. So that's the type of what? Yeah, the entire time. Not just once or twice. So you should go to Freaknik. It's October 20th, 22nd. It's freaknik.info or freaknik.com will redirect you there. And it's in Nashville, which is not nearly as depressing of a place as it sounds. At least after one or two beers. Like you could see from the penthouse at Teldon, the truckers, the hookers bad part of town. I'm not joking. Come and see.
You see that? That's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
You know. All right. So we've actually spent a little bit of time pimping out the other cons, which we just love to do because they are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our fellow cons. So, but we do have coming up in ToorCon, we've done a couple of different things this year. We're actually running a couple of workshops this year. You might have seen that in the program, but we have 2 workshops running tomorrow. One of which is with Bunny, the other is the Seattle Wireless Group doing their talk. We have one of them that's been sold out, but we still have a few seats left for the wireless talk. So if you want to, it's basically, if you're still in town, and if your company's paid for you to be here for another day, hopefully, and can be learned, next year, make your company pay for another day. But we've got an entire on-day session that you're sitting there making crap. Soldering irons, wires, solder. You're building shit for an entire day. It's like the best kind of workshop that you can possibly have. So we do have a couple of positions left. You get what you build out of the end of it. So you've got your equipment. You get everything that comes into it. But it's definitely worthwhile. So if any of you are still here tomorrow, it's worthwhile to sign up for the workshop tomorrow. We still have a few positions left.
How much is it? Wireless one? Well, we only have seats in wireless.
Yeah, the wireless is the only one. Both of them sold really quickly. We only have a few seats left for the wireless, and it's 1,000.
I think we were doing it as like 1,600, but we could probably work a deal or something.
All right, if you the red hair, it was 1,600, but you know he can hook you up. So you might be able to talk him into, I don't know, like $1,000 or something like that, just to start the.
Access point and an antenna and enclosure and all that kind of stuff.
You got that? The Socrates AP, the antenna, the rest of the shit. You get your own friggin' hardware out of this. So, you know, there's a huge benefit for this. So if you guys still want to sign up, we still have a few positions left. They start tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So, I'm sorry, 10. 10. Start tomorrow at 10. So if you guys want to take one of the extra positions, we still have them left. And again, it's like all-day, hands-on, intensive thing where you're sitting there with the instructors. Very small group. We're limiting them to a very small group of people so that the instructors can do actually hands-on with you. So if you figured out how yet to finger paint with inside of the boundaries, the instructors can come up and tell you exactly where that finger needs to go to get that green inside of the number 3. And I presume all of you now have understood that there are t-shirts that are available for those of you that didn't pre-reg. Again, you pre-reg, you get a freaking t-shirt. You don't, you wind up paying more money, and you wind up paying more money for t-shirts. We still have a few t-shirts left. We sold out of the XLs, but we still have a few more of the sizes. But if you want a t-shirt, we still have a few available left. So they're just going to cost you. So next year, pre-reg. So, let's see. Actually, I think I'm at the point where I can go into the general discussion about what happened this weekend. And it's been one hell of a weekend. I'm so glad you guys were here to share this with us. Yeah. Bite me with a 10. I own no 10. So, but first and foremost, honestly, we want to thank you as the people behind ToorCon for being here as attendees. Without you guys, we wouldn't have a conference. Without you guys, we would have a bunch of really kick-ass speakers, a bunch of really kick-ass talks, and a bunch of empty tables and no one sitting throughout the entire con. Without you guys, we don't have a conference. So we appreciate the fact that you guys are here. You took the time out of your busy lives to show up in San Diego. Oh, gee, that's rough. In the sun, and, you know, get a little bit of a tan, hang out at the beach, whatever. But just to be here with us, and we're so glad that you could. So, Dan, you always have to say something. And just for full disclosure, I'm out of booze, so Dan is not going to be rewarded.
All right, so I just thought it'd be interesting to say I've been talking at a lot of cons in a lot of years, and I don't think I've had better questions asked of me after my talk ever. Whatever crowd has come to ToorCon, you guys are incredible, so thank you.
See, we get the good speakers, we get the good questions. That's what we try to do. We try to present you with the best quality experience that you possibly can have. And again, you know, we double over, twice over, quattro over, quint over, sept over. Thank you guys for showing up. We couldn't have the con without you, so thank you guys so much for showing up. Actually, I did a poll yesterday at the level of new attendees. I want to do that again. Can I just see a show of hands for the new people? Newbies? Damn. I'm impressed. I mean, to have that many new people show up at a conference is actually a really good sign. Where the rest of the people that used to show up are right now that aren't showing up is a little bit disturbing, but the rest of you guys. No, I'm just so happy to have all of you people here because you guys are what make the con happen. So I'm so glad to see so many new faces. And, you know, if you like what you see, tell friends. Actually, if you like what you see, go buy the DVDs out there and then Send them to friends, and your friends can get pissed that they weren't there. Actually, no. Tell them about the parties, and then they'll be pissed that they missed those. And then they'll show up next year. Yeah, okay. I haven't slept for most of this week. Yo.
Everybody start clapping really loud.
So actually, last year, I asked you guys for a bunch of input about how the con went for you guys, and we had a handful of concerns that were expressed to us, and we've tried to address as many of them as we could. One of them was the fact that we were out at BFE on the ass end of the convention center. So we at least tried to move closer to the front. So it's still the fucking convention center. It's still far from everything, but we're at least not in buckfuck Egypt. We're a little bit closer than we used to be. So can I get kind of a response from you guys about, I don't know where you were staying or where your hotel was, but were we that difficult to get to? Good. I love to hear that, because the front side, now honestly the back side was like 5 minutes more walking, and it was a pain in the ass as someone that had to do the trip like 20 times in one weekend. But the front side seems to be a lot better for everyone. Fewer complaints? Good. We got a lot of complaints about the lack of food. We tried to do what we could about that. We've got in the guide, the restaurant guide. How many people use the restaurant guide? All right, the 4 of you that actually used the guide on page 14 for finding someplace to eat, I'm sure had a wonderful meal. The rest of you guys, fuck you. I presume that was Juan. Where's Juan? I don't know what Juan is, but fuck you, Juan, anyway. So, but we tried to provide the guide to at least provide you guys with a general area in which you can get food within a limited range. And this year, surprising new tactic, we actually provided lunch breaks. There we go. Yeah, believe me, I enjoyed that regardless of how late my meals showed up both times. But yeah, at least you guys had to have a little bit of a snack, have some food, find some restaurants. I think next year we'll try and do everything we can to get a list, because there's an metric ass load of good restaurants that are out there. It's just a matter of finding them and knowing where you're going. So we'll try and provide you with all the information that we can. So let's see. And then one of the other complaints was the lack of booze. Booze. Hey, but we brought in a bar last night, and people seem to enjoy that. So did that help? I'm seeing some claps out there. It's hard running this in the convention center, which is a wonderful facility. The people here are great, but it's not like being in a hotel where you have hotel rooms, conference center, bar. Hotel rooms, conference center, bar. So, but at least we brought in the bar last night. You guys seem to enjoy that. I think next year, if we're back here again, we'll do the bar multiple nights, just so you at least have that. So if you want to sit around and talk with a friend and have a beer or two, you can at least do that without having to walk 3/4 of a mile to anywhere that's reasonably close. So we've done our best to compensate for that fact. The Friday night drink tickets are fucked up the ass. Sorry, Saturday night, they're gone. We did our best to have a party off-site in a club where we didn't have to deal with the whole drink ticket shit, which a lot of people got fucked on last year. How many people got fucked on the drink tickets last year? Yeah. That was not pleasant, but we did our best to pull it out of a commercial area into a private area. How many of you have been here for the old Doc Bowden? How many of you know what Doc Bowden is? Yeah. You know, in the whole retro theme, we tried to pull it back. We had the old Doc Bowden live. I know that there was some issue with it was crowded as all hell, and there were levels of temperature in there that Dante would be impressed with. But it was hellish. But how many of you got in last night? Good, good. You guys got booze? You guys had a good time? Yeah. Good, that's great, because we tried our best to provide you guys with good booze and have a good time outside of certain issues that, how many people were there until the end? Well, until the unfortunate end. We did have an issue, and I will say something now, where there were some people that were fucking with shit, and I really hate to reprimand people on this, but you know, you don't shit where you eat. No, you don't shit where you drink. And it's just wrong to like fuck with shit when you're having a good time. And we had one particular party, well, there's some people that were fucking with shit, but one particular party that actually was like fucking with the fire alarm system and was asked to leave and left the property and came back to fuck with the system, which is why everything got shut down last night. So, you know, we throw these parties so you guys can have fun, have a great time. I love to fuck with shit. That's what I do. That's what we all do as a culture. We fuck with shit. But you don't shit where you drink. So when we have a party like this, don't spend your time trying to trip the entire fire alarm system to make the entire building flood with water and have, you know, the fire marshal show up, because that's just wrong. It's not a good thing.
Who did it?
You know, I at this point in time so want to release names, but
We'll get you.
I'm not saying shit. I'm not. I will neither confirm nor deny that fact. Because honestly, they should have their ass fucking whooped for that. But yeah, it was me. I was drunk. You know, there's so many wires and such pretty colors. A green wire, blue wire. What do I do? No, just in general, I mean, we're getting to the point where ToorCon has actually prided itself in the fact that we are information-based. We do have a particular kind of con here, that we have a unique perspective on the outside world, and we don't want to get to that point where we're at the point where our parties are interrupted by people fire systems. So, yeah, in general, please don't do that again. Any of you? Or if you're thinking about it, fuck you. So we'll just let that slide right there.
But tell us what you really think.
Actually, I'm curling the toes here just to get the middle toes in there. But okay, all right. You know, every cloud has a silver lining, and the silver lining of that is the fact that we have. Actually, I should thank the sponsors. Actually, last night was sponsored by Microsoft. Microsoft paid to get us drunk. You gotta love that. As I told Andrew from Microsoft, you know, I mean, come on, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. The way to his heart is through his liver. So, now, you want to sponsor hackers? You buy booze. So they did a good job with that. WebSense sponsored the party on Friday night. So we have to give them another. Let's give them another round of applause for that, which is like double plus goodness on their part. So we're just glad to have that. We're glad to have the sponsorship on both of their parts, because without that, you guys would be here at 9 in the morning milling around saying, where's the talk, where's the talk, where's the talk, where's the talk, rather than lying in bed saying, oh my fucking God. So it's a benefit to us in general. So, just checking my notes. Yeah, there we go. So, we do have, well, okay, the downside of last night being shut down early, This kind of sucks, but I'm cool with it because I was actually exhausted and went to bed early. So I don't care if you fuckers got a drink after I went to bed. What do I care? But the plus side to that is the fact that all that booze that did not get drunk, we still have and needs to be consumed. I don't know. You know a couple of people in like black t-shirts that like booze that might be able to help me out?
I bet there are blue jeans too.
So I think as long as you have a black t-shirt on and have like a certain disregard for general society, that we might have some booze for you later on tonight. We actually have a staff party later on this evening that we will be feeding the people that have been working so hard that actually I will take a round of applause for them right now, but working so hard. So you guys gotta, you bastards gotta give these guys a chance to have a fucking meal for a chance. They have a little bit of a meal and everyone else left in town, we're having a party after that. So the party will be posted. All the staff gets a chance to have a beverage or two and a little bit of dinner. Will be posted on the website at 10 p.m. tonight? Yeah. The secret location will be posted at 10. Now, let's see a raise of hands. All the people that can access this new crazy thing all the kids are doing called the internet. No, because that would invite unwanted users. So, all right, so for the 4 people that raise their hands that actually understand how to access the web without actually having to have twisted copper, everyone else in the room, glom onto these people. Because at 10 p.m. tonight, they will tell you where it is. And we should have some food. We should have an ass load of booze. In fact, half the metric ass load of booze that we didn't use last night left over for you guys to hang out and have a grand time tonight. So we do have the massive party going on tonight. You guys, once 10 o'clock rolls around, we'll post the location online. So you guys are welcome to use the restaurant guide and page. Go out, have a grand time on the gas lamp. It's San Diego. Have a wonderful time. Ogle the blondes wearing too little clothing. Have a wonderful time. Have a good meal. And then come hang out with us afterwards. It will be on the website after 10 p.m. tonight. So the party will be happening later on this evening. It will be on the website. And I was actually told that if you don't have websites, you can actually SMS a certain phone number that I'm looking up right now. Is this a wise idea? Should I actually release this number? Well, obviously, if you know someone, you're in. So you're cool. But for the rest of you lame asses, someone's got to get you in. So are we releasing your number? 619? 254? 4920. If for some reason you can't figure out how to use the web, just SMS that number. And then we'll give you directions after. Wait, what is it again? Oh, I don't know. Like, I care. I'm already in. You guys are on your own. Screw you guys. So, David, 619 254 4920. You guys got that? So go out, have a kick-ass dinner, have really good food. If you haven't done Sevilla, we know Sevilla is a good restaurant.
How all their alcohol looks like bongs.
If
Bong of sangria.
If you like all of your booze served in bongs, that's the restaurant to hit. So please do. And people are leaving now that I've announced where the party is. You guys suck. You guys suck. Actually, while I'm at it, so we have all the booze left over from last night, so the party will go off tonight. But while I have you guys all here, and I realize you guys are not a full-on sample of the con, but let me ask you, how many people here are actually paying for a hotel room? And by paying for, I don't mean like you're chipping in 20 bucks to a friend, that it's actually your name on the street. How many people, by a show of hands, are actually paying for a hotel room tonight? Okay. Well, how many people you have a room for tonight, by show of hands? And I presume that was a show of hands I saw for nights, for tonight and last night. Let's do this again. How about for 3 nights?
George, you're gonna wake up tomorrow and be like, what the fuck are these numbers?
All right, so we actually use these numbers to try and gauge where we can position ourselves next year. Last year, the series of complaints that we got were we were in Bumfuck, Egypt, all the way back in the ass end of the convention center, which is a difficult hike. We didn't have booze, we didn't have food. And we tried to remedy all the situations. So let me just field it out to the audience. What do you guys think of the con this year? Can't get from people? Is there more booze? Oh, I am so honored, but at the same time, I know some of you motherfuckers are, because some of you guys are going to complain about something. So,
Force Starbucks to stay open.
yeah, okay. I was told the Starbucks down here would be open. They weren't open. We can work on that. Oh, no, we have way less moose than Shmoocon does, so we're clear on that entirely. So you guys in the hotels you were staying in, you didn't have a problem walking to the front ass end of the convention center because it wasn't the back ass BFE end of the convention center? Tram service. Writing that down right now. We're working on the segue thing. But honestly, from the attendee perspective, it wasn't to walk from your hotel. It was you guys had food. We had a lunch break this year. All right. Yes, I need more booze. But I want to take a second or two then, if you guys are happy, just to thank our vendors. You know, we have a lot of people that sponsor us. I've already mentioned the fact that both websites and Microsoft have provided you guys with free booze, so they should be on your buddy list right now, just because you guys got drunk on their dime, so that's a good thing. No Starch Press has always been a strong supporter of us. Actually, I have some No Starch books to give away somewhere. Bring those books up, and I'll keep them in line. But Irvine Underground, WebSense, the rest of our vendors, we really appreciate the fact they take the time to come out here to provide you guys with some content that would at least be good for you. So, so one of our lectures tomorrow, one of our workshops, is given by Bunny. I'm sure a lot of you know Bunny, the guy that has the scanning microscope in his fucking kitchen right next to the refrigerator. Scary. But we actually have the book, he's Hacking the Xbox book, so do I see someone that is interested in this? I love Xbox! Yeah, you're up here. Yeah, there's booze to have. Okay. So, I want to thank you all for showing up. It's been a great con, and again, we can't do this kind of a con without you. You guys, as the attendees, this is what we do it for. You guys are here. This is why we exist. That's my 5. So, Lego Builder's Guide.